The College Board is facing criticism over claims that it changed its new AP class on African American Studies because of political pressure. Last month, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis threatened to ban the class because it included topics like the Black Lives Matter movement, reparations, and Black feminist thought. State officials cited an early draft of the curriculum. The College Board released the official curriculum yesterday. The Black Lives Matter movement and reparations are now listed as optional project topics. And according to the New York Times, several trailblazing Black authors were removed, including Bell Hooks, who wrote about race and feminism. Now, yesterday on CBS Mornings, we asked the College Board, they were here, CEO David Coleman, how they created the revised curriculum.
We at the College Board don't really look to the statements of politicians, but we do look to the record of history. So when we revised the course, there were only two things we went to. We went to what Brandy described, which is feedback from teachers and students, as well as 300 professors who have been involved in building the course. And we went back to principles that have guided AP for a long time and served us well.
Ta-Nehisi Coates joins us at the table. You know him, of course, the best-selling author of Between the World and Me, The Water Dancer, and we were 8 years in power. Remember that, too. He is also a professor at Howard University. Always good to have you in the studio, Ta-Nehisi Coates. So what concerns you most about the revisions that you're hearing?
Well, really what concerns me is the climate around the revisions. I'm certainly not a person with qualifications to design a curriculum for AP, even AP for African American Studies. I think the board should be free to do their work and do their pilot programs and go through the process and not be influenced not just by my thoughts, but by the thoughts of governors, legislatures who are passing laws, who apparently just want a curriculum that makes people feel comfortable and feel good about themselves.
Now, the College Board told us yesterday this was not about politics. The updates, they say, were based on two factors: comments from over 300 professors and returning to the principles of AP. What do you make of that?
If that's what they say, that's what they say.
I mean, by the way, we should also point out that their response to the New York Times article is pretty aggressive. They call it a gross misrepresentation. They say it is rife with inaccuracies, and they claim to have time-stamped evidence showing that they made these changes before Florida said anything publicly criticizing the course. So that's their position on this. But I think we're having a larger discussion here about how we should talk about race in this country, both in history, both in the present, and then in the future, because the future has political ramifications. What are your takeaways for that larger conversation that we're having now?
I think you got to embrace discomfort. I think there is a mistaken belief that somehow the study of African American history and American history at large is comfortable for African Americans. It's not. It's hard to watch video of Rodney King. It's hard to look at the picture of Emmett Till. It's hard to watch a Bloody Sunday. This is not, activities that we enjoy doing. And so.
And how about Tyree Nichols right now in the news?
Right now. And so when you have like laws like this Stop Woke law, that prohibits any sort of curriculum or training that makes people feel bad or feel uncomfortable. This is deeply antithetical to the project of education, period. And I just think that needs to get across.
It's important to remind people this AP course isn't elective. It's your choice. Nobody's forcing you to take it, and it is a college-level class. College is different than high school, but we allow gifted students who want to learn from it. To Tony's point, how should race be taught in classrooms around America, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, I don't think I'm qualified to say that. First of all, on that level, I just don't, I got to stay in my lane in terms of that. But again, I do have to go back to what I said. The idea that it should merely be comfortable, that it should make you feel good about yourself, that it should make you feel good about your country, that it should make you just feel good about your world, as opposed to being enlightened, which is a very, very different thing. Again, I just think that's totally, totally antithetical. I teach writing down at Howard University. I teach writers that did not think my students were human beings. I teach writers who are racist, sexist, etc., because they have something to say and something to teach that can actually be used that my students should know. Even if they disagree with them, how will you know what you disagree with if you haven't read it?
I mean, Ta-Nehisi, I think about the riots in Tulsa. I didn't even know that story until I was an adult. I was never taught that story. I mean, and it seems like we should know those kinds of, we should know that about our history, black and white. It only seems to be targeted politically, or in large part when it comes to African American studies. Am I reading that wrong?
Well, I think that's a large part of it. You know, I have to be honest, it has expanded to LGBT, studies. And I think in general, any sort of narrative that makes a certain group of Americans, and I would say a minority of Americans, uncomfortable, I think that's where you're going to have a problem.
Yeah, the Republican, to the extent that the Republican criticism of a course like this is rooted in something, it's rooted in not liking identity politics and therefore also not liking any discipline that drills down on identity. That's African American studies, that's queer studies, that's gender studies. I guess they would want them all subsumed under the header of just American history or American studies.
Yeah, I mean, but American is in and of itself an identity. And the reason why we have all these other things, African American studies, queer studies, women's studies, et cetera, is actually to analyze and figure out what that thing is. What is, what does
That's
it mean to be
That's a great point.
American?
Yeah, who are we? What is our story? Who's
Yeah.
at the center of it?
And the reality is history makes us uncomfortable. And when we are in a space of uncomfortability in a classroom, it leads people to be vulnerable and say things that open other people's minds, no?
I think that's exactly right. I think you don't go into the gym and tell your trainer, hey, I want to feel like I'm eating strawberry shortcake. I mean, that is the nature of getting better and improving yourself. It is deeply, deeply uncomfortable, and sometimes it hurts.
But now you've got at least 25 other states that are considering the legislation that would limit, how race and racism is taught in schools. What's the danger of that for students?
The danger is producing a generation of people who are deeply uninformed about the country that they live in.
Is there a role for celebration and patriotism within that?
I do. I mean, but I think it has to be earned. You know what I mean? You don't get to, celebrate on the one hand, all of the good things and then ignore all the bad things on the other hand. Like, I don't think that's actually a true and real grounded a sense of patriotism at all.
All right, Ta-Nehisi Coates, thank you very much. Always a pleasure to have you
Thanks,
here.
guys. Thank you.